I voted for all of the property tax relief bills, and I also carry an eliminate property tax bill myself that's separate, that transforms the way we tax and shifts it to more of a consumption-based, fee-based tax.
Welcome to this special candidate edition of the A-List. I'm Ange Mertens, and we're so glad that you're joining us today. We're sitting down today with a woman at the center of some of the most important conversations shaping our state. State Representative Terri Wilson, who serves House District 23. From education and public safety to the economy and the future of our coastal communities, Representative Wilson has been a steady and influential voice at the Capitol. But beyond the legislation and the headlines, there's a person, a perspective, and a purpose that drives the work. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about the issues that matter most to you, the challenges facing Texas right now, and what's ahead for District 23, plus a closer look at the values and experiences that guide her leadership. Representative Terri Wilson, we're so grateful for you today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So your background is deeply rooted in education. As a teacher and administrator before entering public office, how has that professional experience shaped your approach to the education policy in the legislature?
Well, I think it's vitally important. As you know, I sit on Pub Ed. And so this session in particular was the largest funding increase for public education in Texas history. So we already dedicate about half of the state's entire budget is for education. But we have $8.5 billion new dollars for Pub Ed starting this session. We gave teacher pay raises, and those were between $3,000 and $8,000. And I think having somebody that's been in the classroom, you know how important that is to retain your good teachers. We've done more with incentive programs, with scholarships. We've shored up career and technology education, special education. We've put more money in for diagnosticians because that's one of the complaints that many have, including when I was teaching, which has not been so long ago. I've just been retired for about 5 years.
So, I should have started out that way. I touched on that you were a teacher and an administrator. Why don't you first give us a little bit of your background, your family, and just a little bit about you personally? Okay. We talked about that there's a person behind this legislation.
Yes. And I've always fought for that. My background is I'm a 38-year public school teacher. And I really, really enjoyed my career. I started teaching visually impaired students, so I taught Braille and mobility and all those specialized subject areas. And if you're visually impaired or hearing impaired, you get served from birth. So you go into as soon as the child is born, if they have that kind of a disability, you are working with parents until they're around 2 or 3 years old, and then they'll go to early childhood. So I loved the career of having from birth all the way through. Some of my kids stayed later that were multiply impaired. And so it was a really, really rewarding career. I taught in the housing projects. I started there. And went back to that type of a middle school. I love underserved populations in schools. I found it the most rewarding because sometimes those students don't have a parent at home that's really paying attention, and you are it. And if you change a child's life, you change a family's life, and you change the trajectory and the course. We know, and I value education because I am an educator.
Where were you an educator?
I started out in the Dallas area and then moved and transferred to Houston. And so most of my career was spent in Klein ISD, but I also taught in Conroe ISD as well. So absolutely loved it. Ended my career as a special ed case manager and coordinator for middle school special needs students. Also loved that student population as well. So, that brings a different perspective on, we passed a parents' rights bill, but we also passed a teachers' rights bill because aside from feeling like that they are not supported financially, teachers' number one complaint is that they don't feel that they're supported in the classroom on discipline, that there are kids in their classroom that they cannot get out of their classroom, that the administration is not helping with. And some of that was things that we put on in the Texas Education Code. So, uncoupling those regulations, making a teacher be able to have a voice on how to manage your classroom. So those were really big, important bills that I got to be a part of, and that I felt as one of the few educators in Austin that it really had a say on a teacher's perspective, on boots on the ground, and especially in the area of special education.
And that's so important. I think sometimes people don't think about the discipline portion of it. My oldest daughter is a teacher as well. Well, now she is a teacher educator, so teaches teachers. But she worked at an inner city school in Jacksonville, Florida, and she had a kid that threw a chair at her.
Yes.
And their policy was call the principal, and the principal is supposed to remove the child, and the principal came and sat in the classroom for a few minutes and then left.
Yes.
And she's like, well, what have we just taught our children?
Exactly.
Throw the chair at the teacher,
yes. And when that
felt very
happens,
undersupported.
and when that happens, Angie, it's not just the teacher, but you have disrupted learning for however long that incident took. That's instructional hours that you have taken away from the other 20 kids in the classroom or 30 kids in the classroom, whatever that is. So it impacts every last student there when teachers feel like they're not supported.
So I think that even on your personal question, we still keep going to education.
I know, you're going to have to stop me.
You're obviously very passionate about that. So, well, tell me about your family real quick.
Okay, so we have 5 kids and 6 grandkids, and I have always, long time, I didn't just show up to the Republican Party. I have been long-time activist. I served 3 terms on the State Board of Education, but I've been a precinct chairman and SD11 chairman. I have fought for education policy as well as limited government, free enterprise, all of those things that are important to Republican primary voters. I have fought for 40 years. I went to my first convention when I was 24 years old. I'm now 66. So I've been at this for a really long time. And Dave and I moved.
Who's that?
Dave is my husband.
Oh, you have one of those too.
Yeah. So Dave and I moved to Galveston actually to retire from fighting the good fight. We've done that for 40 years, and we've done it in a volunteer capacity, going to school board meetings, going to city council meetings. We've been just wanting things better for our community that we live in. And then the race popped up, and we decided that philosophically, we did not want the 3 other people in the race to be our state rep, and how could we sit by and do nothing when we have been at this for so long, fighting for policies that we think benefit our communities and our people. And so really that's the heart of it all. Most of my bill ideas, especially all my local bills, come from talking to constituents, having them in my office telling me about a problem that I did not know or something in law that needs to be changed.
Well, and I think that shows that you've been a part of that community. You weren't a career politician that came up through it. I always hate when people... You said you didn't just show up.
Yes.
I interview a lot of candidates, and you're like, well, you've never even been to a meeting of that event. Correct. Or that, you've never been to a city council meeting.
Exactly.
Or you've never been to a
that's
state
exactly
repping.
The same in this race. And I've already had a career. Okay. This is not my career. So I'm there to fight the good fight for policies for my constituents. And that is what I worry about with some of the younger people that enter into the race for whatever reason. I have a great voting record. I have a great track record of showing up because we're retired. So we show up at everything.
You
Ribbon
are
cuttings. I am at
everything.
Everywhere in both counties. And so having drawn an opponent that has not been involved before, that creates a situation where you look at the money that's involved in the race and the motivations in all the race. And I am the last person that is a career politician.
Well, but one thing that you are is passionate. So we've talked about education. That's your roots. That's your knowledge.
Yes.
So I'm going to grab onto that knowledge, and I want you to explain something to all of the voters out there in Galveston and Chambers County. What the heck is the voucher program? I know that you hate when we call it the voucher program. You co-authored House Bill 3, the School Choice and Education Savings Account legislation that has attracted a lot of attention. First, I know you don't like it when we call it the school vouchers. So could you just take a minute and explain the bill and explain the choices for families, but also explain the impact on programs at the public schools?
Absolutely. Well, I'll be happy to. I talked about the historic funding for public education. None of the money for the ESAs, it came out of sales tax revenues mainly, but none of it came out of the school foundation program, which is the way that we fund public schools. So $0 affected our public school funding this year. We took nothing away for ESAs. We are the 33rd state to have school choice. So in some ways, we're way behind other states, but in other ways, we got to see what works and what doesn't. And that is why we chose the Education Savings Account program. So it is for less than 2% of the student population, and priority is given for special needs students and low-income students, students that are struggling in schools that, for whatever reason, we're not pointing fingers. We're just saying for this kid who learns a different way, this has not been the best thing for him. We know that if kids are not reading on grade level by third grade, the outcome is not good. And so, why not give parents a choice in the matter? We have students that are stuck by zip code in a failing school system. In my district, it will probably affect very few students. In Chambers County, we don't have any accredited schools. So the only stipulations for private schools, and they can choose to take the funding or not. We're not forcing anyone to do this. But you have to be accredited and you have to be in existence for 3 years. That way we don't have schools that just pop up. And an accredited process takes a long time for a private school to get anyway. We will not affect their curriculum. The state will not have a say in, the teachers that they hire. That will continue. But what most people don't realize is private schools in Texas are already serving 17% of the special ed students, which is a higher rate than public schools do. So, and with an ESA, they may be able to do more to implement their individual education, program. So, some of the most difficult students, and if teachers were honest, and I'm calling for honesty because I was in the system. I was there every day in the teachers' lounges, in the cafeteria. Some of the students that are the most challenging students to educate are the students that will also leave their classroom for an ESA, possibly because their parents are not happy. The student is not doing, is not progressing for whatever the reasons are. And the parents found a different program that better matches their needs. So it helps both. It really does. A cost of an ESA is about $10,000 a student. And it'll go up to that amount. So like if a private school is currently charging $7,000, then the ESA will be $7,000. It's paid directly to the school. It's not paid to the parent, and that's where the voucher is a different system. And so it's paid to those instructional resources that directly benefit the student. That's where it's
special needs is a higher amount, though. Correct?
Yes, it can be a higher amount. It can be up to $35,000 because, as you know, individual education plans are sometimes very expensive to implement. You might need a speech therapist. You might need a nurse. You might need a physical therapy. You might need very much different mechanisms to implement that IEP. But for the normal, regular student that we pay as taxpayers, it's about $16,972 is the average. That is we have figured out the average cost per student per year for taxpayers. So this is 10, that is $16,792, and most students will be that. And I do have to say, most parents are very happy with their special services in their public schools. Public schools, for the most part, do an excellent job with implementing those individual education plans. They do. And like in Chambers County, where there's no accredited school, the biggest school system over there is Barbers Hill ISD. It's an A-rated school. I don't anticipate students leaving Barbers Hill since they are an A-rated school. And the rest of it's very rural. And rural parents are really involved in their schools. Everything centers around that the community, the football, the jobs are, for the most part, from the ISD. Parents are very happy in rural school systems. This is for that set of students that just learn differently, that just need a smaller class. I will use an example. When I was a middle school teacher, I had a student that had been through 32 facial surgeries. She was of normal intelligence, but very, very physically handicapped, required speech services, but was just I'll start tearing up, but she was the most precious, precious student. But it was a big school, and you can't prevent bullying. You can't prevent all of that. And, she required a very small setting where she had the same kids that understood her disability, that didn't see her for her physical outlook. And for, a long time, she would come to my office and eat. And my office was a safe place for her. But at her point, it wasn't that they were failing her on an academic level. It was that we just could not protect her and provide for her physical disabilities, not her cognitive.
And her emotional needs.
Exactly, and her emotional needs. And my kids also, I started a classical school at the time. We offered her family a scholarship, and they helped work at the school to pay off the rest of the tuition. And she thrived, and she's in college now. And I think about that one situation, but I know there's parents out there in other situations where if you have a student that is emotionally tormented and doesn't like school,
well, and
you can't learn.
So many kids give up.
Yeah, exactly.
I have a kid that learned differently. Fabulous.
Yeah.
We have Clearview here at CCISD that is teaches another way.
Yeah.
One of her teachers explained, we do the 5 fingers of learning.
Yeah.
If they can't read it, then we talk about it. If they're not getting Shakespeare by reading it, we'll do a play. Everyone will have a part.
Exactly.
We'll watch a movie. They eat, sleep, drink, do it all differently. And they don't have homework. They have to finish all their work at school. They have to stay sometimes, and the teachers help them. But what a wonderful program.
Yeah.
Because she'd just given up.
Exactly.
And it was embarrassing for her. Like, she was a cheerleader. Well, if you fail something, then you have to sit out. It's very obvious that you're sitting out, because they make you go,
Yes. Yes.
And so, like, even smaller learning disabilities, they have emotional impacts for kids. And Clearview was just
Exactly.
you know what? She graduated with honors. She was the vice president of the National Honor Society. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
This was a kid who couldn't read in the 2nd grade.
Exactly.
And she's so smart.
Yeah.
But okay, so we need to move on from
Okay.
education. But one thing is, it's not like kids are going to be leaving in droves.
No, they
They're
can't.
not going to take your
It's capped at less than 2% of the student population.
and they're not going to be taking your arts program.
No,
and your
and when
music.
if a student leaves for an ESA, they still retain their local funding for that student, and they still retain their federal funding. So they're not losing complete funding for a student when a student leaves. And again, these are some of the most challenging students to educate. And I mean, there's just so many advantages to it. It's not, we've looked at it across the state. Not one state, that the 32 states that have done this, have lost one program for choir, for football, or all the things that you hear about, this mass exodus, and we're going to lose our funding. We won't have any, all these special programs. That's never happened, not in one single state.
Well, so not scary. So
It's not scary. It's not scary. And
so all these people that are running scared,
no,
that
and
they're gonna
honestly,
lose, it's not a problem.
Galveston ISD, to their credit, had a group of students who were that had either dropped out or were suspended. A private school was willing to educate these students. So instead of sending them off to a juvie place or not having them come back and just drop out of school, that school was having financial trouble. The board, to their credit, Galveston ISD School Board, saw that these kids had an opportunity to graduate at another school. And they did what was best for that student. And they helped fund the private school. They didn't have to vote that way, but they did because it was also an advantage to remove that student that was being disruptive to their classrooms and their kids.
But now it's not all special needs, right? It could fund.
It can fund, but they will have priority, and I do think that those lists will fill up. Yep. They will have priority, but yes, anyone can apply, but they will be given priority.
Okay, so the next biggest issue in Galveston County is property taxes.
Absolutely.
I mean, our property taxes are so high.
They are.
And a lot of them are education.
Yes.
Well, a lot of that tax comes from our ISD.
Yes.
But they're consistently one of the biggest financial concerns for your constituents in House District 23. Over the last session, you supported and co-authored several property tax relief measures, including constitutional amendments to raise homestead exemptions and expand exemptions for seniors and disabled Texans. And you backed a package that increases the general homestead exemption and pushes for additional rate compression. Can you walk us through how those initiatives will tangibly reduce bills for our homeowners in your district?
I will.
How is it going to help us?
I will, and I'd love to, if we have time, I'd love to talk about what we're planning for next session on property tax relief. So, despite the ugly mailers that you see, I voted for all of the property tax relief bills, and I also carry an eliminate property tax bill myself that's separate, that transforms the way we tax and shifts it to more of a consumption-based, fee-based tax. I gain support with that bill every year, but I don't anticipate I'll have the votes for that this next session. But what we have done is we have taken $51 billion that will be ongoing for all future bienniums. So that will remain constant, and that will be set to hopefully eliminate property taxes. It will be dedicated to the M&O portion of your property tax bill, which is your largest portion. It's your school. It's your main school portion. And so when the state comes in,
what is M&O?
The maintenance and operation. So it's like that piece of your property tax bill that is your largest piece. So when the state comes in using surplus monies to buy that down, what that means is that is less of a rate that you will have to pay on your own because the state is making up some of that revenue that you as a taxpayer would normally pay. And that is going to continue on into the next session and the next session and the next session. That will be a constant. So that's a really great thing. So that we have already seen the impact. Most people's property taxes have gone down. We get appraisal caps passed out of the House. We cannot get them done in the Senate. And so that is a significant thing. My opponent went to Austin and registered no on a bill that would cap your rates at 3.5% a year. And also it would create budget transparency and also uniform bond elections. So those are property tax reforms that are working towards that, buying down what you have to pay. And we do need to deal with appraisals. You can have a rate reduction, and you can also have a huge exemption that we did this year for both seniors and regular people. And the personal business property tax exemption went from $2,500 to $110,000. So
some people don't really understand, obviously we bought a house 3 years ago. We knew how much it cost. It's not gone up that many, it goes up every year, but it's not such a huge thing. My mother bought a house in Galveston for, I want to say, about $50,000 about 30 years ago. And it is now about $650,000.
Yes.
That's not just little tax increases.
No, it's not.
Now, she has the blessing of taxes being capped when my dad retired, pretty much when they bought that house. But when she leaves us and the kids inherit this house, there's no way that we can. I mean, the taxes will go from $900 a year to $20,000.
Yes, and what people don't realize is I live under that same property tax system.
Right.
I am on teacher retirement system, and my husband's on Social Security. Okay. So we this year have made a decision to drop our TWIA insurance coverage, which means if there's a major disaster, we will lose everything that we have, which is our major investment, like everybody else's, is our house, right? So, but we own our home, so we can afford to drop it, where if you have a mortgage, you cannot. But that is part of the problem, is increasing appraisals along with insurance, okay? We desperately need insurance reform to go along with it, and TWIA reform. But we have had to look at that ourselves and go, we can't pay this bill and still live here, right? We can't pay the insurance and the property taxes. So we want the reforms as much as anyone else. We are fighting for our constituents, but we're also fighting for us. And we're fighting because owning your own home is a major tenet of really what it means to be an American. It's your dignity. It's something that most people, it's their number one thing that they save for and work hard for their whole lives. And to lose that is devastating.
Or seniors that have had these homes forever, they're going to be taxed out of their homes.
Yes.
So we will leave it to you to try and get those caps on the assessments on our homes.
Well, I'm optimistic because the governor is going to step in this time. And
so speaking of the governor, so you, this is a Republican primary. Most of the people that are looking at voting for you are obviously Republicans. So some of them are excited that you are such a conservative, staunch Republican. They say that you're among the most conservative freshmen in the House and that you actively promote Republican priorities. Critics do sometimes suggest that ultra-conservative policy alignments or national party priorities can pull legislators away from pragmatic, locally focused governance. What would you say to voters who feel that statewide national ideology alignment has taken precedence over constituent services and local problem solving?
Exactly. Well, there are conservatives, and you can up your rating if you're a conservative that votes no on everything. Okay. And I could be number one on a scorecard somewhere as the most conservative, right? I'm not there. I still rank in the top 10. I still am a limited government, anti-spending person. And so I do vote no a lot. But I do not just blanketly vote no. So when it's infrastructure, that is a proper role of state government. I have voted for those bills. I have brought millions of dollars into both counties on things that are a proper role of state government. Infrastructure, drainage grants, mental health care, law enforcement, especially in Chambers County for rural law enforcement. Rural services got really upped this session. Fire departments, volunteer fire departments. I vote yes on all of those. I have brought millions of dollars into both counties, and actually in Chambers County, I brought more in than any of my predecessors in just my 2 years in session. I vote for infrastructure bills. I vote for nuclear energy and, new generation oil and gas. I vote for those things. I vote for transportation bills and
we don't have time to talk about it, but you vote for shrimpers in our local economy and
wastewater and all of those things. I'm not. I know that's part of the opposition's trying to paint me into a corner like that. But if you look at my voting record, and it's public, and I am running on my record, I have a great record of supporting both counties, of supporting those things that provide and make lives better for our communities. But I'm also reasonable and going, okay, I'm not going to vote for this bill unless we put a sunset provision in it, which means it gets reviewed. If we're going to create an agency for water and drainage, let's make sure that we're doing it smart so that we are reviewing any government agency to make sure that we're dodging it and to make sure that we're not continuing to fund something that is no longer needed. So I use common sense, but I'm all about the people in my district and working hard for them. I am retired, so I'm a full-time state representative.
So I was talking to someone the other day that's a Democrat, and they said, I ask everybody, I'm going to interview so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. What's a question you would like to ask? And I kind of thought it was sad in that she said, my voice doesn't count in Galveston County. And I was like, well, you still live in Galveston County.
Yes.
There's problems that you're a homeowner, those kind of things. And I do think that it's sad that she feels that her voice doesn't count.
Yeah.
So because of all that, I will say that since
and my portion isn't solid Republican. My portion of Galveston County is like 53%.
Right. You have a huge portion. And if you listen to your commercials, which by the way, wherever your commercials are
the Trump,
this weekend, man, I every commercial I heard was Terri Leo Wilson, so they all say backed by the president, backed by,
I am.
All of the Republican leaders, which is great, when people want to know that you're backed, you are a Republican. But what can you tell the constituents that are not Republicans that you're still representing them, that you are their
that's a great question, Angie. So I start out each session and we have a lot of interns. Our office probably has more college interns than anyone. One reason is my chief of staff is great at training him. He's probably trained half people in the Capitol. And we've got really great kids. And we want them to learn and we want them to be part of the government process because we're not going to be there. But I asked them to scrub every last Democrat bill. So that's their first assignment. And I'm scrubbing them to see what I can support, what I can build bridges on. And so they know my philosophical viewpoint. And I help them also on their little bills, on their mud districts, on their water bills. I am not a legislator that does not build bridges, does not cross the aisle. I do. Whenever I can. And that just builds goodwill for your own personal legislation. But the shrimp bill, that's nonpartisan. I've helped the shrimpers with the shrimp labeling bill. I don't ask, are you a Republican or Democrat before I help you? I don't ask the people of Bolivar, who I gave a wastewater option to, are you Democrat or Republican? So I've passed a lot of bills. And even I've got accused from some people of, I passed the Juneteenth funding bill for a Juneteenth museum to come here. And, I faced some criticism. Well, what if they, go off the rails and reinvent history or whatever? And I want history told.
Juneteenth, Galveston has that whole thing.
Is Galveston.
And people that don't know that, Galveston has they were where it was last read.
Exactly.
The Emancipation Proclamation had been signed.
Correct.
And they do that reading every year.
And Galveston has been on the front lines for so many things. We were the first county that had a drugstore sit-in. It is a plight on our country and our nation, and we have to tell history accurately. But we still have slavery in almost every world nation across. And we have made progress. And
and if we don't teach what happened, don't repeat it.
Correct. Exactly. We have to tell the story, but we also tell the story in a way that, things that I did not know about Juneteenth and our history in our area that I learned. As soon as the Emancipation Proclamation was passed, these families left with nothing but clothes on their backs, and they built communities and they became prosperous. And they shared their wealth with their community. They built churches and they built schools for the African American children to learn. They valued education. They valued community, and that's what they did. And so that rise from having nothing, from being downtrodden, from having your relatives hung, from losing everything, from just the whole horror of slavery. That was so against really our principles as a country, and just a really dark time. To come out of that and to rise and to build a community, those are the stories that we need to tell. From the move into Reconstructionism. These are things that we take pride in, that we have overcome.
Well,
and
that's
Juneteenth.
such a great community that
absolutely
have the leadership from there.
I walk on the same bricks in Galveston on the Strand that the slaves walked on when they were brought and drugged off the ships and families were separated. So that history is real for us. And it was right that we have the Juneteenth Museum. So I pass bills for my community. I don't pass bills based on whether you're a Republican or Democrat. Obviously, I'm conservative on my viewpoint, but that doesn't mean that we don't help constituents every day. We don't ask what their political
flooding,
persuasion.
infrastructure, taxes. None of that has
nothing to
a
do
lie. But
with
you
partisan.
do have a very split community.
I do.
And you know,
I do.
I think that she felt Galveston County doesn't have that split, but really, there are parts that are all Republican.
Well, people always say, like they did on school choice, well, you're not listening to your community. Well, I ran on a platform of promises that I make you. I kept those promises. I fulfilled them. I have been involved in my community. I've shown up in both counties at everything from ribbon cuttings to big events. And one of the things that is important, you want a politician that tells you the truth, okay? I give you my platform, and then you vote for me or you don't vote for me. You cannot possibly please every 2 million person in your district. They don't all agree. So when people say you're not listening, it means you're not agreeing with me. It doesn't mean I haven't listened. It means I ran on a platform of school choice. I ran on a platform of things that you might disagree with, but the majority agreed with, and that is how a representative government works. The majority wins the policy by elections, but the minority should always have a say.
Absolutely.
Should always have a process and a part and a chance to win. And so that's why you run as a politician on certain things that you promise, and you keep your promise.
Well, and that's why one thing that here on the A-list, we don't bash our opponents. We don't really talk about our opponents. I always say, why give them airtime? You know,
Yeah.
This is our time to learn about you.
Yes.
And that's how people need to meet their candidates. Sit down, talk to them about their policy. Don't listen to all the rhetoric and all of the mudslinging, but listen to you and what you're saying. But more than that, look at what you've done. You know, people can say, I'm going to.
Yeah.
But you have a public voting record, and if they agree with it or they don't, it's something you've done, so they can watch that.
Right.
Well, that brings us to the end. We are even over, but just want to make sure, is there anything that we did not cover? You have about 3 seconds.
I will give you my cell phone number. It is 713-249-5046. And I really don't mind if you call me. If you have any questions about what I did or didn't do, I am an open book. I will tell you if I did it or not and why. And so I know during campaigns, things get said and nasty, and they pull and say, okay, what's going to upset people the most, and then assign it to you. Like I said, I am running on my record. I do not mind talking about my record. I am proud of my record. And I'm also proud of constituent services. And anytime a constituent wants to talk to me personally about an issue, it is me. And I get people all the time, is this really you or is this a staff member? It's me. So, and call me. I will be glad to clear the air.
Well, there you go. She gave you her cell phone number. So that wraps up our conversation with Terri Wilson here on the A-List Special Candidate Edition. Voters have a critical choice to make, and understanding the candidate's goals, experience, and vision is an important part of that decision. Get to know your candidates and get out there and make your voice heard. You choose the next or the future of this country. So early voting begins on February 17th and continues to February 27th. And then Election Day is March 3rd. I'm Ange Mertens. Thank you so much for joining us and watching the A-List. We'll see you next time.